Hey, so this is my module 1. It says 1.2 and I'll explain that later for Rust. Let me give you a quick rundown of what the project does. It is a website scraper, so the first thing I'll do is if I have any changes I'll run cargo build, and that will, this is just a warning error. This will just say if there's any errors and it'll just compile the code. Then I can run cargo run. Expand this terminal a bit. Welcome to the Rust scraper. So for this tutorial, I'll show you how to use all of these. So the first one is I'll scrape the content of all paragraph tags. I'll hit 1. My CSV file name will be test file 1, and then I'll just paste this link in there. I'll say scraping tags, and then we'll be done. And then in the source folder, I can open up test file 1, and yeah, this will have all of the content of your p tags. And then let's try number 2, scrape all ahref tags. I'm going to use the same file name again. This will overwrite it, but just so it's a little bit easier. So it'll scrape them, and there you go. Those are in there, and then we'll just do the same thing for the script tags. The issue with script tags is they will not always show up correctly because most script tags reference a different layer. There we go. So this actually got this function that gets the date time, but let me find an example of it. Um, Yeah, this right here is kind of what I'm talking about. This shortcut doesn't work in live preview. Please insert into an editor and do this because it's not dynamically extracting elements. It's just getting static ones. Let's scrape the image links. We'll do test file 1 again. And yep, so there are only 2 links on here. Then I'll just hit quit program. So let's take a look at what this is actually doing. Let me just double check my video is still working. Awesome. So up here we use the IO, the path buff, scraper HTML, and path. Path isn't used, but when I take it out, it doesn't compile for some reason. And you can also find these in the cargo TOML file. Request is in here and request is in here. That's something that I kind of have a question about is what the difference between the use statements and the TOML file is. So the first thing we're going to do is going to name your file function. So this function takes no parameters. It will first say let this mutable string equal new string. So when you declare a new variable in Rust, you always say let something, and that's usually the name. If you say let mute, that means that the variable can change. If you say let, the variable cannot change, and it'll pull up an error if you try and change it. This will just ask, hey, what's the name of your CSV file? So this opens up I/O. This is standard input, and then it reads the line, and it says this is a muted variable, and it expects. I'm not quite sure how this expect statement works, but if this doesn't work, it says failed to read input. And this will show up if there's a couple times when I was programming this that I accidentally pasted the URL into the CSV file name, and it would say, hey, this I can't read this because you can't save this as a name. And then this says the raw path is going to be string equals format, and then we'll add. So what this kind of does is it gets the CSV. So if I wanted my, in this case, test file 1, it will trim off any delimiters, so commas, spaces, whatever at the end, and then we'll add CSV to the bottom, and then change it to a path. And then this will change it to a path buff, which is basically a variable that represents a path on your computer. So this will say, um, I think if you printed this off directly, it would just say, um, it would probably show like my device slash rust web scraper slash source slash testfile1.csv or something like that. And then it just returns that. And the interesting thing about Rust is you can do this where you say path buff dot dot from my path, and that ensures that the return statement is a path buff. These little arrow, this arrow in a function means that that's what it returns. And here you can do this, or I could just type out my path and it would also export it. That's a really handy thing. Let's take a look at the next one. This one is called request breakdown. So you pass a HTML string in here. I think this is a string slice. So it's borrowed from a string in the main function and it'll export an HTML. So it says let response. So this is a new variable called response. It's static, it can't change. Response error, and then it uses the request library, and then it blocks part of it, and it gets the URL from this. And then this variable is in string format. It is the HTML content, and it just says response. So this right here unwraps. I think unwrap is almost like an error thing. So if there's an error, instead of crashing, the program will just stop. And then this converts it to text, and then this is just another unwrap statement. And then this says let document, which is the last variable. This is now converted to the correct format, HTML equals scraper, HTML parse through the document, and extract the HTML content. And then it exports document. So as I was talking about up here, this exports just document and just does that. You don't have to say return or anything like that. Let's go to the second to the last function aside from main. This is called take URL, and it produces a string. So I'll have a mutable string. It's just an empty new string. Enter your website's URL, and this just says left click to paste because I always forget that. So again, IO will read from standard input, read line. It'll say the variable is mutable, and it's not a new one. It will, and then again, expect if it doesn't meet the qualifications, it'll fail to read. And then it just needs to be a string, so it'll export the string. So I actually spent about an hour and a half working on this part specifically, and I want it to be able to return this in URL format, so it could straight up pass it into request breakdown, and I spent so much time working on it, and it would not work no matter what I did, which is weird, because convert it to a URL is the same process as converting it to a path buff, and that was really easy. That didn't take a while. And then I realized it was because request breakdown takes a spliced string and not one of these. And so I just kept this as a string and it just converts it in here. I'm sure that's something that for improvements I could change, but it works fine and it doesn't make it any slower, any longer of a process. It just means it goes between two functions instead of one. But at the same time, a function cannot return two things. So there kind of needs to be two functions. So I am satisfied with the way it turned out. And here's where the big juicy part of our program is in main. So we first let a new boolean equal true so that we can loop through that. And then just a welcome message. And then this will say, this just declares a new variable. So, and again, standard input, just read from it. And then this converts it into a number. And I think if it's not a number, oh, let me minimize all these because you don't need to see these yet. I think if it's not a number, it'll say, yeah. So if it's not a number or if it's one outside the range of 1 to 5, it'll say please input a valid option. And because it's in a loop, it'll go through again. Matches are basically like case statements. Um, so the first option is you want to scrape paragraph tags. So all four of these options use the same, I think, first. If you include these, I like to format stuff like this so it's easier to read. If you include these comments stuff, the first like 10 strings or so are about the same, or 10 lines. So this will say, my new file path is going to equal this, and this is going to name it from name your file. Temporary path equals file path.clone. This is going to make a cloned reference to the path, and the reason you need to clone it is because it will not directly reference it, which is very annoying. Again, this is nothing I spent like an hour working on. Then at the end, I was like, oh, I just need to clone it. It's not that difficult. And then this will set a new URL string from take URL. This will say this converts. So this is what I wanted to return from take URL, but it would not return an at string variable. So I manually need to do it in here. And then this will just say, oh, okay, we're starting the scraping. And then this statement will just say request breakdown off URL. This is the converted URL. And then this is where the code starts to change, aside from just here. So I'm going to select, so item selector, scraper. Scraper is a library, and selector is what we want to use from scraper. These are basically kind of like directory guides for the libraries, and then I'll parse through it, and I'll find anything that matches a p tag, and then unwrap is just the editor thing. And this will say let mutable variable my writer. This opens a new writer. This does not change in any of them. I could write this as a function, but the way pointers work with permanent files is a little difficult, so I just left it like this. And this says for each, so selector is going to basically generate a list of anything that matches the p description. And so I'm going to say for element in that list, I'm going to select the item, and let text content equal a string, so I'm going to convert it into a string, and it's going to collect whatever that p tag holds, and I'm going to say I'm going to write that as text content, and I don't, this at symbol I think is a delimiter, and then again expects it, and then it just says scraping successful. So this is when you have an element that holds something directly. So this will work for h1 tags, paragraph tags. It could also work for divs if you want to extract everything from divs. But let's say you have an image file, and here we go, scrape image links. And image files, if you know how the tags work, do not hold anything inside of them. Inside of the image tag itself, the tag does not hold it. Inside the tag itself, you have a link to the image. So how can we get that? So this starts off very similar and just says, you know, clone the path. The reason we clone the path is because I'd like to say at the end, your results were saved to this file, and you have to clone the path name to print off the name. If you don't, it'll say it can't print it off because that path has been changed because the path has been updated with text. Although it works in here for some reason. And so this will again go through the same thing. We're going to select image instead. Open up the writer, exactly the same. Here is where it differs. So we're going to say for each element in this list, we're going to select it. Here's what we do. So we say if let sum image URL. So this is going to say inside of image we want to find, I don't remember what they're called, but it's classes inside of tabs. We want to find something called URL, and then we want to do value, or maybe this, oh, okay. So it doesn't matter what you put here. This can be literally be anything. This is just a temporary value that you assign to this. So say my temporary value is going to be equal, but I'm going to convert it into a string the second I extract it. This is going to equal from my temporary element dot values inside dot attribute source. So when I declare a image reference in HTML, the source is what will basically be extracting the image from whatever website or other directory on your server that it's stored in. And that's how it gets it. So this is going to go in there and say, hey, I'm going to steal the source, and then I'm going to open up the writer and write this temporary variable, and then unwrap it again. And yeah, this video has already gone over, so basically recording scripts works the same as paragraphs because it's saved inside those tags. Hrefs works the same as images because the href does not physically hold, actually the href holds the name of what you display the link as, but that's not important. You want the link itself. And yeah, for Rust syntax, it was a little bit different to learn because these two colons here are kind of confusing. Now I get how they work. It's almost like a directory, but it's still a little confusing. But yeah, that is my video.